the darkness and was approaching the light there. And I noticed that on this rock, it was a big, huge boulder right out in the middle of this darkness. And there was a person sitting on a throne. And the individual that was sitting on it was emanating light. Very, very powerful, bright light.
What if the future of humanity wasn't just a matter of technological innovation, but also a spiritual reckoning? Elon Musk often speaks about humanity's need to expand beyond Earth, the risks of artificial intelligence, and the responsibility we carry as creators of our own destiny. But what if these warnings echo truths far deeper than science can reveal? In this gripping story, Brian Melvin recounts his near-death experience, a harrowing journey through the afterlife where he faced unimaginable darkness, divine revelations, and an urgent message about the choices we make. Brian's encounter with Jesus didn't just reveal the consequences of individual actions. It painted a picture of humanity at a crossroads, eerily paralleling Musk's concerns about the risks of unchecked ambition, destructive technologies, and the moral dilemmas of advancing civilization. As Brian was shown a land unknown, a place where souls faced the consequences of their earthly decisions, the parallels to our world's growing challenges became hauntingly clear. Could this otherworldly journey hold the answers to questions Musk himself often raises? Where are we headed? How do we avoid self-destruction? And what is our ultimate purpose? Prepare to dive into a story that connects the realms of faith and technology, one man's spiritual encounter, and the scientific truths Musk warns us about. This is a tale that will challenge not just your beliefs about the afterlife, but also your understanding of the path humanity is carving in the universe. Are we truly prepared for what lies ahead? Brian Melvin was an ordinary man living in extraordinary times. It was 1980, and life for him was a cycle of work, parties, and the simple pleasures of youthful recklessness. A construction worker by trade, Brian was no stranger to hard labor, camaraderie, and late nights unwinding with his friends. He didn't spend much time pondering life's deeper questions or what might come after it. One day, while working at a site in Tucson, Arizona, Brian unwittingly consumed contaminated water that a co-worker had brought from Mexico. The water carried a deadly strain of cholera. Within 72 hours, his condition deteriorated rapidly. His body was ravaged by dehydration, and he slipped into what doctors later described as a state of clinical death. But what Brian experienced in that moment would be far beyond anything medical science could explain. Brian found himself rising out of his body. He could see his physical form lying lifeless on the bed below. What struck him first was the clarity of his vision. He no longer needed glasses, yet he could see with perfect sharpness. The second realization was far more unsettling. He was no longer tethered to his earthly self. He hovered briefly, feeling weightless and disconnected. Then, in an instant, he was transported into a vast, dark void. The darkness was absolute, consuming, and oppressive. It wasn't just the absence of light, it felt alive, as if it were pressing against him, testing his resolve. This wasn't the kind of darkness one experiences on Earth. It was something far more profound and chilling. As he floated, Brian began to hear whispers. These weren't audible in the traditional sense. They resonated within his mind, speaking in a language he couldn't fully understand, yet deeply penetrating. The whispers seemed to answer questions he hadn't asked. Why does evil exist? Why do people suffer? What is the meaning of life? It felt as though ancient truths were being revealed to him, truths too vast for the human mind to retain. The whispers also spoke of humanity's future, how choices made in this life ripple into eternity. In a way, it echoed the warnings of Elon Musk, who has often spoken about humanity's responsibility to secure its survival. Was the darkness Brian encountered a metaphor for the consequences of neglecting that responsibility? As the whispers subsided, Brian saw a faint light in the distance. It was small, almost imperceptible at first, but it grew steadily brighter. The light seemed to call to him, offering both comfort and an undeniable sense of purpose. He felt drawn to it, as if it held the answers to everything he had ever wondered about. What lay at the end of this light? Brian's journey had just begun. The light grew larger and brighter, pulling Brian toward it with an irresistible force. Unlike the oppressive darkness, the light was warm, inviting, and filled with a sense of love and peace. As he approached, he noticed that it wasn't just a light, it was a presence. Before him stood a massive rock, and atop it sat a figure emanating brilliance, unlike anything Brian had ever seen. This figure exuded both immense power and profound compassion. Brian immediately knew who it was. Jesus. Jesus didn't speak in words, but his thoughts entered Brian's mind with perfect clarity. The first thing Jesus conveyed was a question. What have you done with the life I gave you? Brian felt a pang of guilt. His life had been a series of self-centered pursuits, with little regard for the deeper meaning of existence. Standing before this divine presence, he realized how much he had taken for granted. Jesus' gaze was piercing, yet filled with love. It wasn't condemning, but it demanded honesty. Brian began to understand that every choice he had made carried weight, that his actions, or inactions, had consequences far beyond what he could see. Jesus explained that Brian couldn't enter heaven, not yet. If I let you in with what you know now, you would misuse it, Jesus said. Sin would find its way into heaven through you. These words struck Brian deeply. He was overwhelmed by the realization of his own shortcomings, but he also felt a sense of hope. This wasn't the end of his journey. Jesus had something to show him, a glimpse into a realm beyond life and death. As Brian stood before Jesus, he couldn't help but think of the warnings from modern visionaries like Elon Musk. Musk often speaks about humanity's need to rise above its destructive tendencies, to become a species worthy of survival. Was this encounter a reflection of that same message? An urgent call for humanity to take responsibility for its future? Brian was guided by Jesus into a realm he referred to as a land unknown, and it was unlike anything Brian could have imagined. This wasn't a fiery hell from popular imagination. It was far more haunting. It was a place of cold justice, where souls were held accountable for their earthly choices. As Brian's surroundings became clearer, he saw rows upon rows of towering cubes that stretched infinitely in all directions. Each cube glowed with an eerie light, and within them were trapped souls, individuals reliving the consequences of their actions over and over again. Brian hesitated to look closely at first, but something compelled him to understand what he was being shown. In one cube, a man sat at a desk piled with money, the very thing he had worshipped during his life. Yet no matter how much he collected, the bills turned to ash in his hands. His torment was to constantly reach for something he could never hold. Another cube contained a woman surrounded by shadowy figures, all of whom whispered accusations. She had manipulated and destroyed lives, and now those lives haunted her endlessly. The further Brian traveled, the more he saw that each soul's suffering was intricately tied to their actions in life. This wasn't arbitrary punishment. It was a reflection of the ripple effects of their choices. Each cube was like a mirror, forcing its occupant to face the consequences of their decisions. As Brian processed these horrifying scenes, he began to think about humanity's current trajectory. He thought about the warnings of Elon Musk, who often speaks about the dangers of unchecked technological advancement. Musk has warned that if humanity doesn't act responsibly, we could create systems, like artificial intelligence, that trap us in cycles of suffering. Could these cubes be a metaphor for the prisons we create for ourselves, both in this life and beyond? The whispers from earlier returned, softly but urgently. They spoke of humanity's collective responsibility, of the weight of our choices. Brian understood that this place wasn't just about individual souls. It was a reflection of the interconnectedness of all actions. The message was clear. We are all architects of our own destiny. As Brian continued his journey through this land unknown, he encountered beings that made his skin crawl. At first, they appeared human, friends, loved ones, familiar faces, but their appearances began to shift. Their smiles twisted into sneers, their eyes turned reptilian, and their voices grew guttural. These were not humans, they were demons, and their purpose was deception. One demon approached Brian, its form flickering between a friendly figure and something grotesque. It hissed, "Follow me," in broken English, motioning him toward another row of cubes. The creature promised answers, safety, even happiness, but Brian felt an overwhelming sense of unease. As he hesitated, the demon's patience wore thin. Its smile faded, replaced by a menacing glare. The other demons around it began to reveal their true forms, twisted, decayed, and reptilian. Their movements were jerky and unnatural, like marionettes controlled by an unseen puppeteer. Brian watched in horror as these demons manipulated the souls trapped in the cubes. They whispered lies, created illusions, and toyed with their victims' emotions. One soul, believing it was being rescued by a loved one, stepped forward only to be dragged deeper into torment. This scene reminded Brian of the illusions humanity often falls for, false promises of wealth, power, or fame. Elon Musk's warnings about the dangers of AI and unchecked ambition came to mind. Are we as a species creating technologies and systems that will deceive us, leading us into inescapable traps? Brian realized that these demons thrived on manipulation. Their power lay in their ability to exploit fear, guilt, and desire. He understood now that the only defense against them was truth, the kind of truth that Jesus had revealed to him earlier. Surrounded by darkness and deceit, Brian felt himself losing hope. The demons circled him, their eyes glowing with malicious intent. They taunted him, reminding him of his failures, his sins, and his unworthiness. He felt paralyzed, unable to move or speak. In his desperation, Brian did the only thing he could think of. He called out to Jesus. "Help me," he cried, his voice trembling with fear. In an instant, the light returned. It burst forth with such intensity that the demons shrieked and scattered. The darkness recoiled, retreating into the farthest corners of the realm. Jesus appeared once more, his radiance overpowering the void. Jesus approached Brian and lifted him into his arms. "You are not alone," Jesus said, his voice filled with both authority and compassion. "Your journey is not over. You must return to the world and share what you have seen." As Jesus carried Brian, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace and safety. The torment, the darkness, the fear, it all melted away in the presence of the light. For the first time, Brian understood the true meaning of grace. When Brian woke up in the hospital, his first words were panicked. "I'm not in a cube, right?" The doctors and nurses around him were stunned, not just by his sudden return to consciousness, but by the speed of his recovery. Brian's body, which had been ravaged by cholera, showed signs of rapid healing. The medical staff called it a miracle, but Brian knew it was something far greater. He had been given a second chance, a chance to live with purpose and share his story. As Brian recounted his experience to his friends and family, he was met with a range of reactions. Some listened with awe, moved by the sincerity in his voice. Others dismissed his story, calling it a hallucination or the product of a dying brain. Despite the skepticism, Brian felt compelled to share what he had seen. He began writing down every detail, every vision, every lesson. The cubes, the demons, the whispers of truth. They were all pieces of a larger puzzle, one that humanity needed to understand. Brian couldn't help but think about Elon Musk's vision of the future. Musk often speaks about the importance of creating systems that benefit humanity, not destroy it. Brian realized that his experience carried a similar message. Humanity must take responsibility for its actions, both individually and collectively. Brian's life was forever changed by his journey to the land unknown. No longer did he see life as a series of random events. He now understood that every choice mattered. He began speaking at gatherings, sharing his story with anyone willing to listen. His message was simple but powerful. Live with purpose, make ethical choices, and never lose sight of the bigger picture. Brian also reflected on the role of innovation and technology in shaping humanity's future. Elon Musk's work with AI, space exploration, and renewable energy often highlights the same themes: the importance of foresight, responsibility, and moral integrity. As the years passed, Brian's story touched the lives of countless people. He became a living reminder of the profound truths he had encountered, a testament to the power of redemption and the enduring hope that lies in faith. Even decades later, Brian would look back on his journey with gratitude. He had been given a glimpse of the unknown, not as a punishment, but as a gift. And with that gift came a responsibility to inspire others to live with intention and courage. Brian's story, like Musk's vision, serves as a call to action. Whether through spiritual growth or technological progress, the message is clear: humanity has the power to create a future filled with light, or to trap itself in darkness.